Okay, it looks like it might be a minute or so even after 6:30, so we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order and ask for the roll to be called, please.
Here.
Here.
Present.
Here.
Here.
Present. Thank you. We have a full committee, so definitely have a quorum. Move on then to approval of agenda and addenda. Is there moved by Mr. Patterson, seconded by Mr. Goss. He moved his hand as well. Any additions or corrections to be made? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes. Move on approval of minutes from the ELEC committee meeting June 8th, 2017. Is there such a motion? Moved by Mr. Goss, seconded by Mr. Patterson. Corrections, additions, subtractions to be made there?
Only a thank you to Tammy.
Yes, thank you, Tammy. Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes. We will then move on to public participation. Have 3 slips thus far. I know we're all here to talk about the Lincoln Avenue. I'll just go ahead and say it in front. I imagine the committee would like to have some interaction with you, so if you would be willing to stick around till later in the meeting, then we could potentially ask questions of you, and you can maybe even give us some more information. But at this point in time, I ask that you try and keep your comments to about 5 minutes during the public participation, and then, like I say, later on we can interact with you more. So first I have Janet Charlo. Yes, please, and would ask that you just state your name and where you live for the record, and Tammy's going to come up there and turn the microphone on for you. Thanks, Tammy.
Okay. Janet Charlo. I live at 3610 North Lincoln Avenue, Urbana, Illinois, and have for, with some interruption, 40 years. So we got a letter from Mr. Hall last week stating that we could no longer be North Lincoln Avenue because there's a duplicate North Lincoln Avenue that's being constructed. And we tried to discuss perhaps if we could be North Lincoln Way, if we could be North Lincoln Trail, if we could be North Lincoln Court, some form of North Lincoln, and it did not appear that that was a possibility. So we were given the name of Champaign, which to all of us seemed difficult not only to pronounce but to spell. And we would be spelling it on every form that we ever had to give or anybody we ever had to give that address to. So we also have some residents that are aged. We have an 88-year-old resident that's lived out there 60 years, so you can imagine the impact of this on her. So when we were asked to submit some other name possibilities, we first started with some versions of Lincoln to make the transition easier, and those have been ruled out, and we then came forth with Squire Farm Road. My great-grandfather purchased and farmed all the land that Shirley Squire and we reside on, and all the land that Olympian Drive was used for, and also all the land, practically all the land that's used for North Lincoln Avenue. Some of the Quorum land was also used, but most of it was Squire land. So there would be no project without Squire Farms. And we feel that since there was an effort to find some sort of historical presence, i.e. Chickapin was the name of an oak tree that used to grow in the area. Nuttall was also an oak tree that used to grow in the area. So we felt that the historical presence of Squire Farm Road would be a perfect choice. It would be an honor to the founder of the area in which we live and the centennial farm that was used for the project. The house on Nuttall was the home place of my grandparents, Richard and Catherine Squire. They worked hard to own and cultivate the land, and their pride has been passed on to their family and their landowners. Richard Squire Sr., my grandfather, was also a township supervisor and a member of the County Board of Supervisors in the 50s and 60s. So I can say that the entire project has been difficult. This is just the last piece of difficulty, I hope. One of our residents people is 88 years old, as I said, and she has lived there for 60 years. So I guess the other question that we have is that this is going to require a huge transfer of information for all of us that live out there. We're going to have to change our wills because it's described as the residence that's no longer going to be on that address. Insurance, passport, Social Security, all policies, insurance type, bank accounts, checks, property tax forms, credit cards, all membership cards, and all vendors. So it's going to be quite a huge project. And I guess we just wonder whether we can even have any help with any of that. But I think the main thrust of my discussion would be that the road be named in honor of the person who purchased and had the Centennial Farm that was used for the project, and thus make it Squire Farm Road. Thank you.
Thank you. Next I have Harold Charlo.
My name is Harold Charlo. I live at 3610 North and Lincoln Avenue, and I'm here on request of my wife's aunt, Shirley Squire. She is the 88-year-old lady, I shouldn't say that's not very, lady that lives on the farm property there. Shirley was a big supporter of the project. However, she never realized that the existing North Lincoln Avenue would not cross the new Lincoln Avenue. So her house kind of sits on the corner of the road. She's talked to Jeff Blue, and I think Jeff Blue has, told her that this is the way it is, but she requested that I come here and ask for clarification that there will be no road built from the end of this road, and I don't have a map, and I hope you do, but it will now Squire Farms Road will come up to Lincoln Avenue, and then it will start over on the other side, and then it will end at Shirley's house, and then there will be a road that we propose, Centennial Farm Road. But she believes that will be very confusing for anybody to get to her home and explain and so forth. And I know Jeff Blue's talked to her and so forth, but she just wanted me to come to the meeting and express that concern for her. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, I have Joe Behrens.
My name is Joe Behrens. I live at 3609 North Lincoln, directly across from Harold and Janet. I am opposed to this Squire Farms. As it says in this letter, it could lead to confusion in times of emergency dispatch and can result in unnecessary delay of emergency sponsors because there are other Squires properties or roads that are named Squires, and I feel that this would be confusing. We've always been known as Lincoln, and we would like to stay with Lincoln. We don't see that there are other Lincolns, yes, but there are also other Squires. So I don't really see where how you can dismiss Squires and then not dismiss Lincoln. The other possibility that we would be to come up with something like Acorn or something that isn't confusing. We would just like to be assured that if something does happen, we would like it noted in the records if there's a delay in the emergency service, that since you are overruling a standing precedence not to have a confusion for emergency service, that the board would accept the responsibility of the legal responsibility if there is something like that would happen. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Don't believe there's anybody else in the audience that wishes to speak. Seeing none, we will close public participation then and go to communications. Is there any communications anybody has? Seeing none, we will then move on to our first kind of action item. We have line 7 for information only. We have A, the anticipated changes to residential electronics recycling collection options. Susan, you want to fill us in on those, please?
Hello. As you have seen from the ELEC notes, this information is about some anticipated changes to the local residential electronics collections efforts, which since 2007 the county has coordinated along with cities of Urbana and Champaign and more recently Savoy. And more recently, more of the outlying communities have all sort of coordinated to try to make the best of a bad situation here with the mandate that the landfills will no longer accept 17 categories of electronics. So we're very happy that this summer the Illinois General Assembly passed Senate Bill 1417, and we expect the governor to sign it by September end, or we meaning people across the state, because this has been a problem for the past couple of years here in Champaign County and throughout the state. And the problem is collection of electronics and most specifically televisions. So this information is presented tonight only to let you know that we do expect changes for the better. During 2018, however, the sort of current trend would continue with a weight-based goal, and local governments would probably continue to try to collaborate to fund 2 one-day residential electronics collections to occur during 2018. But once the bill is signed into law, hopefully, beginning in 2019, a new system would start whereby the manufacturers would be required to provide an e-waste collection or program to transport and recycle electronics collected from residents, and they would be responsible for the costs of transportation and processing, a cost which has been tried to hasn't been sufficiently covered in the past. So that's good news. That could be a cost savings all around to residents and local governments and taxpayers. So the manufacturer's take-back program would be based on a population-based convenience standard, and Champaign County is expected to receive either one program collection site or 4 one-day collection events with all but operational costs covered. And those kind of costs are associated with acquiring. Operational costs means getting the site and sorting and collecting the materials. Everything else would be covered, all other costs. The county will need to opt in by March 1st of 2018, and so between now and then, local planners will be looking to understand more completely the exact cost benefits to be had with different options that could be available. So other various changes will be considered. We want to be able to present the best possible choices to the county board and other local governments.
Thank you, Susan. Any questions on that? Ms. Petrie?
Well, my question is for the public, and that is, with this movement or potential movement, will that resolve some of these other logistic issues that you've been handling so graciously for the county, and that it limits how much you can bring to recycle, the types of TVs, some of these aspects, which then these items end up in our local ditches, which then have a cost connected with that?
That's a good question. I really want to see the issue about televisions abandoned in ditches to be addressed very sufficiently, because I know the township road commissioners have been concerned about that. At present, there is no good option for TV recycling collections to occur, and we do our best with the one-day collections to limit our numbers of televisions to 2. That should probably go away. I don't think we need to be concerned about that. We'll have an answer to that once we get the details of how these programs will actually operate. There is no limit on other electronics right now. There's options locally available for all other electronics besides televisions, with no limits, just business hours limitations.
And then, as you usually do when you get the final pieces of information, again, this is for the public, it will be up on the website as a reference point, and this leaps just momentarily ahead to item B, which we discussed during the agenda meeting, and that is somehow constructing the website so that when somebody does an internet search for this kind of information, it pops up high in the choices. And that I learned about, as I mentioned at the agenda meeting, on Nextdoor. It was very clear that people were not finding the information because it was a very long thread on this. Thanks.
Further discussion on this? Seeing none, it does kind of tie right in with B, the opening of online registration for the October residential electronics recycling collection. And Ms. Monty again, please.
So this week and leading up to September 5, which is the online registration opening date, area recycling coordinators have been doing a media push to get the word out. Here at the county, we sent notices to the libraries of participating communities and to the village presidents of participating communities so that they will be aware of the registration date. It's first come, first served. And we are increasing the capacity to 80 registrants per 15-minute increment. So usually we can handle about 1,200 participants in 4 hours.
Any discussion on this? Seeing none, we'll go back to Ms. Monty for the C, Champaign County membership in Mahomet Aquifer Advocacy Alliance, MAAA, and link to the MAAA website.
This is a note to let you know that Champaign County is officially a member of the Mahomet Aquifer Advocacy Alliance, which has a website, and I gave the address here. We're working on posting it, a link to this website directly on the county and RPC web pages and other prominent places. There's some issue with accessibility of the town of Normal's web space for this site, and they are working that out, and there should be a fix. But in the meantime, this is how you would connect with that site. And the county is listed as a member. I mentioned previously the county is membership is heavily comprised of participants from Champaign County, more so than the other 14 or so counties involved. So it's pretty impressive in that regard. Thanks.
Discussion on this. Seeing none, we will move on then to 8, Items to be approved by ELUC. We have the authorization to seek requests for proposal for demolition or enclosure for property located at 504 South Dodson Drive, Urbana, pursuant to enforcement case ZN 12-31/21. Is there such a motion? Moved by Mr. Brooks.
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Petrie. John, do you want to fill us in on this a little first?
Well, this is a property that we've brought to the committee a couple times before. In March of this year, the county board approved the state's attorney seeking court orders to do various things, remove garbage and debris, most importantly, declare the property abandoned, and then court approval to cause demolition, repair, or enclosure. The court did make all of those orders, so this is officially an abandoned property. It's truly unfortunate that the neighbors have been subjected to this for so long. The property indeed looks abandoned. It was damaged by fire. It's open to intrusion. The yard is unmown. People continue to dump garbage on the property at the street. So it's a bad situation. So what we'd like to do is, well, you should know that on August 21, it will be your property, officially. This goes back to, we've been keeping the committee updated. We have like 10 dangerous structures in Urbana Township. It's the township with our greatest number of dangerous structures. We have a few other dangerous structures spread throughout the county, but we have a real problem with Urbana Township. So we're trying to take care of those one by one. Demolition and cleanup is expected to cost $16,000. A little background here: we normally have $6,500 in Department of Planning and Zoning budget each year to do whatever we can for these structures. $6,500. We spend it for appraisals on properties, for title searches. This year we spent about $3,000 removing the playground equipment from 2603 Campbell, which is another property the county acquired by demolition. We're trying to sell that property. The appraised value is only about $3,000. We haven't sold it yet. Just last week, we acquired another property on North Carroll Avenue where the county demolished another dangerous building back in 2015. We'll be marketing that property soon, but neither of these properties have sold yet. Our $6,500 was spent some time ago, so we would like to send out an invitation to bid, see how much it's going to cost to have this property have either the structures removed and the entire property cleaned up, or alternatively just enclosed with the exterior garbage and debris removed. Last time we checked with someone on an unofficial basis, enclosing and cleanup would cost about $4,000. Now, if we know that if we opt to just simply enclose and clean up now for $4,000, that whenever we get the money to do the demolition, we're going to end up spending more than $16,000. But we're sensitive to the budget problems the county board has. Since it is your property, we feel like we do need to do something. So we just want to touch base with you once again before we send out that invitation to bid. Once we get the results from that invitation to bid, then we'll be going to the committee of the whole for a budget amendment. So action tonight won't approve anything more than going through a bidding process, and once that bidding process is over, we won't be able to do anything until we get a budget amendment. So I hope that's clear. Are there any questions?
Ms. Petrie.
Yes, I have a couple of questions. As you've been gathering information about that property, have you gathered any information when it is cleared, what will be the return when it gets sold? And second part of that is what is the opportunity of selling as is, which would be less than if it were cleared property, but maybe at the bottom line would be greater because there wouldn't be anywhere between $16,000 and $20,000, depending on if it's done in a subset or in the gestalt of what you explained to us. And then second, if you can remind us, not all the individual properties that we have to focus on over time, but the amount, the total amount. I can't remember that from when you show us the matrix and what you estimate. Do you remember what that total amount is? Oh. That's a budget. I mean, that's an overall big budgetary question as we go into 2018, and because this will come up incrementally as you bring things forward to us. And if you don't have it right on the top of your head, maybe in the next packet, just remind us.
Okay.
Thanks.
I can give you an update on that at the next meeting. I know in the past when we have shown you that matrix, we were always hoping to do 2 or 3 properties a year. In fact, it is truly amazing how much time just one property takes.
Yes, I appreciate
the state's attorney has really put in a lot of time on these properties lately, and we're still not going to be able to do 2 properties this year. Now, if we ever did do the 2 or 3 that we're wanting to do each year, that would be like $50,000 a year just in demolition costs.
That's good to remind all of us because we're going into budget season, and that is the driver of why I did that subset B in my.
I can't recall if we've gotten an appraisal on this property. I feel like probably we did, but I just cannot recall. But this property is quite similar, I think, to the property on 2603 Campbell, and the appraisal is only $3,000 to $4,000. Now, on the other hand, the 1101 North Carroll appraisal is $30,000. We're trying to market that right now. So, if we could get even half of that property's appraised value, well, I mean, if we could sell it for that, that would be fantastic. I don't want you to think that's going to sell anytime soon. I don't have an idea of the value of this property.
Is it difficult just to get a rough ballpark so we have some idea when these bids come in, if it
we can certainly have an appraisal by the time we come back with the bidding results.
Right, exactly. That'll help our decision making. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Further discussion. Mr. Goss?
Sure. I'm just doing the same thing out in the rural property, so your estimate of $16,000 is right on. I drive by this property probably 4 or 5 times a month as I cut through from my office out to I-74, and I've always wondered why nothing's been done with it. So I can appreciate that the residents, they've really put up with a lot. I think we ought to get something done with this. I don't like the thought of just fencing it in, because I don't think it's going to eliminate an eyesore that's been there for 5 years. So I know we're tight on funds, but we need to figure out how to get this done. Thanks, John.
Further comments, questions? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of putting this forward for bids for demolition or enclosure, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes. We'll then move on to 9, items to receive and place on file by ELUC to allow for a 60-day review period. We have the draft 5-year update to Champaign County Solid Waste Management Plan, which was distributed. I guess entertain a motion first for this. Moved by Mr. Goss, seconded by Mr. Patterson. Thank you. Ms. Monty?
Yeah, I'll just say a few things. For some of the newer ELUC members, I'll mention that back in 1989, the state adopted the Solid Waste Planning and Recycling Act and mandated that counties over 100,000 population adopt a solid waste management plan by March 1st of 1991. So that's some of the history behind this. And so back in 91, a 5-volume, very detailed plan was adopted, and then this 5-year update represents meeting another state requirement to update that plan every 5 years. So what I have gone and done in doing this update for the past 2 times has been to provide updated information under recycling program status primarily, to make minor adjustments to the implementation actions recommended, and that's pretty much it. So this represents limited time available to work on such an update, and anticipates that possibly sometime in 2018 we'll have additional time perhaps to authorized to work on the comprehensive update of the county solid waste management plan. So this can be held. It needs to be submitted during 2017. I just submitted a copy tonight, so anybody that has comments or questions, please feel free to contact me.
Thank you. Questions and comments, Ms. Petrie? Go ahead.
Well, I have a couple of questions/suggestions. Even though this is the county solid waste management plan, do you have any outreach ideas to get elicit comments from some of the various organizations that focus a whole lot on these aspects, letting them know that the plan's up on the website and inviting comments? Anybody at the university who does work and research along these lines, so they though it's going to be tough with the school starting, but it's 60 days, and maybe some of them could find some time, or some of their research assistants might be able to find some time to do that. And then how are you letting the municipalities know that it's up there for comments?
Good suggestions and questions. And first of all, we have a household hazardous waste leadership team, a voluntary group, who had received a copy of this also, and they are wanting to look at it, understand it, and provide their suggestions. I have many examples of other counties' material management plans, is what they're referred to often now. I have contacts throughout the state that I can reach out to. I thought some more of the input could be a process of public input and review period could be really amped up during the comprehensive rewrite of the plan, as opposed to this cursory 5-year update.
May I follow up? Remind me, when is the comprehensive rewrite scheduled?
It's slated to be begun next year as part of the fiscal year 18 county planning contract.
So I understand you're pondering whether it should be far-reaching input on this aspect of it. So you could sort of two-tier it then, couldn't you? You could do closer, more regional input on this one, and then save some of the other agencies that you just mentioned for the bigger project, because I'm assuming that a whole rewrite or a relook is going to be a rather extensive project.
Well, I'll just say that the cities of Champaign and Urbana staff has received a copy of this 5-year update, and they are reviewing it and will receive any corrections they may have. I've been checking with communities throughout the county to make sure all changes have been noted. And so really the limited resources don't allow for much further review of this 5-year update at present.
So limited resources from what perspective are you referring?
My time as designated recycling coordinator for the county has has been spent for the year primarily, for fiscal year 17.
Okay. Okay, so then as we move forward to a more comprehensive review, then we're really going to have to strategize how to best use your time so we can encapsulate the thoughts and ideas from outside our own very narrow view. But when I say narrow, it means that we're just looking at it in a siloed aspect, whereas if we can broaden the lenses, it would be great.
I'll just follow up with one last comment. Back in October of 2015, ELUC received a proposal regarding the comprehensive update that contained a complete scope of services, and I think you'd be pleased to see that it was very expansive.
Further discussion? Seeing no more, we will move on then to 10. Items to be recommended to the county board. We have A, proposed change of street name for portions of North Lincoln Avenue. I don't know unless somebody really wants to go ahead and make a motion right now. I mean, would be open for that, or if we want to discuss it first.
Would be it appropriate, Mr. Chair, for the 3 people who spoke to us in public participation to come up to the desk, and if any of us have just any general question,
that's
would
what
that be okay?
Yeah,
All
that's
right,
fine. I just was asking if anybody really wanted to make a motion right now. And we'll also make note that John mentioned that Leanne from the GIS Consortium is here tonight in case we have some question, more, I think, technical that she could help with to answer. Appreciate you coming. So I guess then go ahead and throw it out there for someone who has a question. If you are willing to answer questions, I assume you are, for the Charlos or Mr. Barnes or John or Leanne, whoever. So, Ms. Petrie.
Well, I'd like to start with Leanne, if you don't mind. And the reason for wanting to start with you is to better wrap my head around the issues that are a concern of MetCAD, because I think that would maybe give us some parameters within which to then ask better questions of the citizens who have come before us. And one of the main focuses I wanted to start with is I do know, because I've seen it with the firemen, that they have very clear books as to where various things are, and there are many communities around the whole United States that have complex naming. So I'd really like to have you help me appreciate the pros and cons of why you couldn't use a Lincoln or you couldn't use a Squire, and why we might need to go to Evergreen or some other entirely different name before I can even think I can ask a really good question.
Does this mean it's on? Okay, so I'm speaking just from what I've gleaned from MetCAD, so, this is coming third party.
That's more than we have.
Okay, so I think the main issue in Champaign County is not so much with fire protection, because those are kind of public entity based. The people are based in town. They know the streets. They know the area they live in. So I don't think fire protection is really that big of an issue with dispatch. I think the issue is the fact that Champaign County has private ambulance companies, and those ambulance companies service the community. And those companies aren't, they have drivers that aren't as familiar with the community, and that's, I think, where a lot of the issues stem from. So they rely heavily on GPS systems. Some, I think, are personal GPS units that they have in their car. So that's my understanding where a lot of the issues kind of come about. They're not as familiar with the community, and unless they get into trouble, they're not directly being routed by MetCAD.
Mr. Goss?
in your experience, how long does it take for an average GPS system or even ArcGIS to update? So I think ArcGIS is probably fairly quick because we're in-house, but I mean, Google Maps and all those other things, I see things out in the country that don't update for years, so I don't know what your experience is, how fast that would be changed.
So yes, that's correct. So we would update our GIS immediately. So whenever a change occurs, we'll update it as it happens. We do have links and resources, so we can notify companies like Google, TomTom, TeleAtlas. They have interfaces that we can interface with and update their information. Now, it's up to them to accept or not accept that information, and we have no control over that. All we can do is go to their website, input the change, and then hopefully they'll accept it. And as in terms of a feel for the time of that turnaround, I really don't have a good feel. I mean, some places will notify you if they've accepted or denied the change. Some say they'll notify you and you never receive anything. So, I mean, that's really the best we can do is to utilize these resources that they've sent us, so, or that we've found. Does that help?
Just to follow up, I mean, I grew up in Knox County, and we went to 911 addressing from the rural routes. I mean, to this day, you put in 983 Knox Road, 1800 North, you will not get to my parents' house. It just won't happen. I mean, it hasn't updated now. That's a very rural county, too, so I don't know if that...
So there is one other way, too. So with changes, MetCAD will update what's called the MSAG. And so the MSAG is distributed out, and I assume that, so long as a change gets in the MSAG, it should also filter through some of these other agencies. So that's an important step in the process, too, is to get that MSAG updated. And that's the Master Street Address Guide. And you'd have to talk to MetCAD for more details, but I do know that once that gets updated, that also will help filter the addressing changes.
Mr. Brooks?
Well, so there's going to be a change either way. I guess my question maybe for John or Rick is, in the proposal we're saying Squire Farm Road is the preferred, and then we put a disclaimer that the property owners know that there's a risk to this. Why is if the property owners prefer a Lincoln Corridor or Lincoln Way or something like that, why is that more risky than Squire? Because they're both matching. I don't understand why you prefer one over the other since they do prefer that.
Well, at this point, MetCAD is opposed, just plainly opposed to the use of Lincoln to name a street one more time in Champaign County. There's Lincoln Avenue and there's a Lincoln Road, and MetCAD is adamant that you use Lincoln one more time and we will have problems. That doesn't tie the county board's hands, but adopting a street name that the local dispatch agency is opposed to is really not a recommended thing to do. Whereas MetCAD believes that even though there is a Lincoln or a Squire Court and a Squire Place in Urbana, they feel like adding Squire Farm Road will not be create any significant new problems. Well, for one thing, we should not have, and I can't remember the exact term, but we shouldn't end up with duplicate numbers on Squire Farm Road that there are on Squire Court or Squire Place. But if you went with something that uses Lincoln, you could well end up with duplicate numbers, like on Lincoln Avenue versus Old Lincoln Lane. Leanne, if I'm missing something here or misexplaining something, please clarify, because I don't know everything that MetCAD knows about these addresses. Leanne knows almost everything MetCAD knows. So we're doing our best to, bridge the gap.
So I think John's correct. I mean, if there happens to be, I don't know the long-term plan for development in this area, but your Lincolns would be running parallel. So you could be in a situation where you're going to have the same address number assigned to both Lincoln Avenue and Old Lincoln Road, or whatever you name it. And MetCAD has issues already with Church and Old Church Road. So that's been a very big sticking point for them. And from my understanding, I don't know the nature of all the issues, but that has been a problematic, having those old and just normal church has been an issue for MetCAD. And so there have been incidents along those roads. So I think that's kind of another reason why they really want to veer away from Old and Lincoln.
Ms. Petrie?
First, I feel an obligation to apologize to the residents out there that this wasn't brought up earlier. We knew the road was being worked on. Why the delay? And I hope this is not setting precedent that this is the way we do things. So setting that aside. Now that we're in this situation, has anybody looked at the addressing? Has anybody looked at the potential of the subdividing that might go on out there, so that whatever choice is made this evening, one way or the other, we don't create more problems down the line?
Well, development is a private issue, so until a developer proposes redevelopment, not redevelopment, but development that extends a street, we don't really know what the plan is. All I can say is the east-west road, whatever the name is on the east-west road here, that road is probably never going to be extended. So, well, we're proposing that be named Centennial Farm Road. But the point is, earlier we had suggested, well, why not use Squire Farm Road for the east-west road, since that road is unlikely to ever be extended. I can't say it won't ever, but just looking at this map, you see the Saline Ditch, less than half a mile to the east, an unnamed tributary about a half a mile to the west, not as big as the Saline, plus there's a railroad then not too much further to the west. I just think it's very unlikely that road is ever going to be extended. The north-south road, you should plan for that road to be extended at some point. Not because anyone is talking about it now. It's not going to happen in 10, 20, maybe not even 30 years. But the city of Urbana is not going to stop growing. At least we all hope they won't stop growing. And so at some point, that road is going to be extended.
Well, they're already talking about extending Olympian east to 45. I mean, that's...
Well, talking about the extension of these, mile section roads is something much different than talking about this little road here. But you're right. I mean, they're planning to grow because they're talking about these.
Well, they're
roads.
planning to do it all the way to 130 and make a circle road. We all know that's the part of the conversation. That's a little bit why I asked my question. So we're having a legitimate discussion on this part, but there is a much larger issue that we probably won't be here when that comes up, but as we're doing this decision making, I do think it's part of our job to think ahead as much as we can so we don't create major issues for the next people who are coming along to work on this. And it's going into Fort Harris, and Olympian's going to 45, and if they have their way about it, it's going to go to 130, right through the farmland.
Further discussion on this? Mr. Marsh.
Just a quick curiosity. Why does Squire Farm Road, or the proposed Squire Farm Road, why does it dead end in that little space? Is that a huge expense issue? What's that? It seems odd.
That is a purely transportation engineering issue, which I am not, neither is Leanne. I think it has something to do with, if you'll note, they want these road intersections to be normal, perpendicular. And when you've got a road that is at an angle like the new alignment of Lincoln is, then you've got to swing out these other roads. That takes more land, costs more. I suspect it's a cost issue. I think at some point maybe that will be connected, but it just wasn't worth it right now is what I think.
Further discussion, comments? Just checking. John did inform me at the agenda meeting that we don't necessarily have to do anything tonight, but that we probably definitely want to get something done in September, with the idea being that the new North Lincoln will be opening in November. Not that we necessarily want to drag it out, but yet then again, more time isn't necessarily a bad thing on something like this, because no doubt there's feelings, especially for the residents. Maybe they could truly come up. I mean, given more time, they have their preferences now, but just saying, maybe they could come up with some name that, oh, hey, this just popped in my head. What do we think? And everybody would agree out there. Mr. Hall.
Another thing I want to make the committee aware of, I don't really want to make you aware of this, but I feel like you should know. We change people's addresses weekly. We don't do it because we like to change addresses. We get contacted by Metcat and fire protection districts about problem addresses throughout Champaign County, and we change people's addresses weekly. So, and I can't imagine how much trouble that is for a homeowner. But on the other hand, we are asked to do it weekly. So this is not so unusual. It's never a fun thing. You never make a friend when you tell someone they've got to change that we're changing your address. But on the other hand, it needs to be done.
Mr. King?
Mr. Hall, is there any support to the resident when you change the address? Like, is there any service or anything that you all do to help with that?
We just try to do it as clearly and efficiently as we can, but no, it's up to them. We contact the local service providers and the U.S. Post Office, but their mortgage company, all of their companies that they do business with, all of their utilities, it's up to them to do that. And, I suppose I wish we could do that for folks, but on the other hand, we don't have staff to do that.
Further discussion, ideas from anybody on the committee as to what we might want to do with this, if we want to put it off till next month? Ms. Petrie?
Well, yes, it was mentioned at the agenda meeting about giving a greater window of time. I would be somewhat in favor of that because this has been laid in the laps of these folks in a very, very short window of time, and as Mrs. Charleau pointed out or reminded us, it's been a very bumpy ride on this project throughout for all the people out in that area, and maybe a little bit more time for thinking about it. And we may end up with the same names, but just the acclamation that could go on with a little more time might be a courtesy.
Okay, I guess I'll just take a little bit of my prerogative. You don't need to come up to the microphone to answer this. Would a little more time be fine with you to think about it more? I mean, do you have a problem with that? Just for those in attendance, just shake your head or say yes. Would that be fine? Yeah, thumbs up or thumbs down. I mean, Yeah, so we would. I guess okay. Okay, so yeah, just I guess for those in the public who might be watching this later on or watching it live now, yeah, the idea that the Charlos don't necessarily feel that their recommendation will change, and they are going to be doing some traveling in September, but yet I'm thinking maybe the committee's looking to take a little more time. Doesn't sound like it's necessarily. Okay, so is that a motion then to?
I would make a motion to table this for until our next ELOC meeting, which is September.
Yeah.
Point of order, there's no motion on the floor. You can just ask the
Or
chair.
just ask to
Just
defer.
ask the chair to
Okay,
defer.
yeah. That's true, Pies. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Weibel. Okay, so.
There you go.
Or Mr. King?
I would just add to that, if it's possible, so the Champaign County Incorporated Area Street Addressing Standard, is it possible if, as we're considering names, I don't know if there could be assistance with whatever is developed being in line with that? I don't know if Champaign is the only option, or is there another option that would fit?
Updated at the table was actual from the planning and zoning to suggest Squire Farm Road and Centennial Farm Road.
Well, no, I'm sorry. The Chinkopin, the names, I guess, because it seems like there's an issue with the names. I didn't know if the street addressing standard, if it was just about the duplicate names, or is it about the name itself, Chinkopin?
Well, again, the current recommendation is to have Squire Farm Road and Centennial Farm Road.
So I guess the time that we're being given is not to consider another name. Is that what we're saying?
You can. From a staff level, I mean, we will do whatever we're asked, but
Go ahead, Patsy.
Well, I just had Mrs. Charlotte's comment triggered my wondering, and I didn't think of doing this before I came to the meeting, just an internet search, if there is some documentation that these are the things that you have to do when a street name or a number is changed, and then the next column in the matrix being it takes 30 days or it takes 15 days to do these things. So as a consideration, I spoke for giving a little bit more breathing time to this, but in doing that, are we pushing it back so much that they can't get these things documented correctly by the time that this goes in place in November? With a delay in September, not leave enough window of time to get the documentation changed for when officially Lincoln Avenue opens, is the essence of my comment.
In addition to what the residents have to do, county engineer has to get new road signs printed. So I think delaying until September should still work. There's less time to coordinate, but it should still work.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know if we were.
And there'll also be a notification letter going, officially, an official notification letter will be mailed to all the residents. And with that letter, you'll get so much time to change all your information before the change goes into effect. That's typically how it's done.
Yeah, I mean, even if this happened at the latest possible date, they would still have 45 days to do all of that. Now, that means that there is no time to waste in that 45 days. You've got to get it done.
But they do have, thank you for that clarification. That helps.
Ms. Furtado?
And kind of echoing Patsy's question, is there in that letter, do you have any sort of like checklists that you send to people? Like when Ms. Charlo mentioned the will, that's something I would never think of. And while we might not have the staff to help them go through it all, but if we could at least give them a suggested list of things, that seems like that'd be, like, we could even say maybe this isn't comprehensive, but make sure you think of these things.
I talked to some legal counsel about wills. It really has no impact on wills except for if you're mailing it somewhere. The biggest impact is mailing things. Because, if a will is written in 1982, it's going to use the addresses of 1982. And really, it's property descriptions, of course, the most important thing. If they just say, I live at 101 East Main in 1982, well, that'd be the address they used for that. Of course, passports don't have an address, so it wouldn't impact them. So really, it's mostly banking and mailing are the biggest things. And to tell the truth, I'm not, and I guess your driver's license, but I'm not using my driver's license to prove my checking account in years. Because you just don't cash checks at a store much anymore.
And going back to your question, while we don't have a list, we do, we suggest, that they need to contact their bank and their utility providers and things like that. Now, maybe there's a few more things we could put on there so that we've at least, bracketed those things that we presume everybody has to deal with. So we can take a look at that.
Mr. Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have the misfortune to have had my address change also, so I've gone through this. One of the things that I found was really important is contacting the post office and making sure that they get the information put into the address management system, or AMS. Once that happens, many companies use that software to correct their addresses, and that a lot of the things I didn't think about, like magazines or stuff like that, got automatically changed for me. So it was really I really had to focus on the banks and the key stuff, but a lot of things were automatically updated for me. So that might be of help.
Thank you. If there's no further discussion, which is fine if there is, it sounds like we're kind of maybe all on the thinking to defer this till the September meeting. Ms. Petrie, you have some more comments?
Well, I'm just doing a quick and dirty right now on the internet. It echoes a bit of what Mr. Snyder just said. So there are some that sort of have a rolling thunder of the change rolling through, and then there's some other cues and things to be thinking about as you change. So it's not I haven't found a nice, neat matrix with columns, do this and this and this, but there's some cueing here that you can look at. Yeah.
No, Mr. King.
And I'm just trying to be clear. So we're pushing just so that we could have more time to consider Squire Farm Road and Centennial Farm Road, or whether to stick with Chinkopin and the other.
Or any other name. Okay. I mean, if I guess I would throw it out if somebody even watching in the public thinks they have a great name, throw it out there. I guess. I mean, I'm not gonna say it would be accepted at all, but I mean, who knows? Somebody, I guess, in the general public, it's possible, could come up. I mean, it might be like winning the lotto, but it probably would be like winning the lotto. But if you think you have a great name,
we could say the residents are offering
but definitely
a prize.
it'll definitely give the residents some more time to try and potentially think of another name, and potentially even maybe us here on the committee and so on. So if we're all kind of in agreement, we'll defer that to the September meeting. Ms. Petrie, one more thing.
I have a question to ask Mr. Snyder based on a question or statement of Mr. Barron's, and that is there any liability that comes to any entity that renames, whether it's the county or a municipality? Can you speak to that? He expressed concern about that aspect.
I can't say with certainty, but I believe that this would fall under the issue of sovereign immunity. We're performing a government action that is part of our duties to do so. My concern, and I appreciate the comments about Old Lincoln. I kind of think that to me it's somewhat logical, just as a lay person, thinking about what I would find is the most logical way to do it. But if MetCat is recommending against us, then I have to defer to their expertise in this area, because they clearly answer thousands of calls each year, and they know what causes problems. And so I know that they have the safety of residents most in mind. So I would defer to their opinion on this.
Any last comments? Mr. Charlotte, if you have a comment, if you could come up, you could borrow Susan's or come up to the public, would probably be the best.
I would just, like to get a clarification. In my own opinion, I think you're making a mistake if you pass on this tonight. How are you going to handle people new? There's only 5 houses on our road. That's all the people that are involved here, and I think my wife and I represent 4 of them. Would we contact Mr. Hall with new names? People contact Mr. Hall with new names. Then at the next meeting, you'd have to go through all those names and decide which ones you want, or see if they can change Mr. Hall's recommendation. I think we've had discussions with Mr. Hall, and I don't think the staff recommendation is going to change on this. So I think giving us as much time as possible to get our addresses changed and so forth is just beneficial to us. And I think throwing out more names now just complicates the project. Thank you.
Thank you. After hearing that, is there... just asking the committee, do we still want to defer, Mr. King?
So I think I was probably more in line with what was just described there, but with the one caveat, I think that Mr. Behrens mentioned whether it could be Acorn, like if there needs to be another tweak to it. But I think in line with what was said about MetCat, I would support that as well. If they're not going to oppose Squire Farm Road, I feel like we're on the right path at this point. So.
Yeah, if somebody would care to put a motion
to put forward the recommendation of the zoning administrator.
So that would be for the Squire Farm Road for the north-south and the Centennial Farm Road for the east-west, just to clarify. Mr. Weibel.
Better get a second.
Yeah. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Mr. King. Mr. Weibel.
Yeah, I just want to point out on the Lincoln streets, there's quite a few in Champaign County. Got North Lincoln Street, Tolono, North Lincoln Street, Thomasboro, Lincoln Street, Philo, North Lincoln Street, no, that's also Philo, East Lincoln Street, St. Joe, and there's probably more. So there's a lot of Lincolns out there. I know there's Lincoln Trail, Lincoln Way in Champaign. I think there's Lincoln Trail somewhere. Maybe not, but there's a bunch of them.
Thank you. Mr. Snyder.
I had a question. Looking at the map, there's only one property that appears on Centennial Farm Road. Is that correct? Have we had any contact with the resident at that location, or is that person here tonight? Okay. What's pardon?
Ms. Charlo, would you mind coming forward to?
Mm-hmm. Oh, I see. I'm just wondering since there's only one person on there, if there's any way to at least make that person happy.
Mr. Goss, did you have something further?
Is there a reason, and maybe it's logical, but is there a reason that just can't bend around and all be Squire Farm Road? Once it changes direction definitively, it's got to change the road name? Okay.
Yeah, of course, except for...
Well, it's actually, when there's a 90-degree corner, it changes.
So we have a motion that's been put forward and seconded. Do we want to discuss it further, or are we going to go ahead and vote on it? Or Mr. King, do you have something further to say? I mean, that's fine. This isn't necessarily an easy topic, obviously.
No, I was just going to ask, I think one of the questions that was brought up, or one of the comments by Mr. Behrens was you mentioned something about a delay and the board being responsible for a delay, but I wasn't aware of or how a delay would be classified. I don't know if that's a direct question to him or if that's to how. Yeah.
What,
What would constitute a delay in service?
Well, it's probably more theoretical than anything, but even the resolution, I started drafting the resolution today. If it moves forward with Squire Farm Road, the resolution that you'll see at the county board meeting will talk about how Squire Farm Road is not consistent with the addressing standards, and the county board should be aware that that could lead to some problems. Nonetheless, MetCAD is not opposed to Squire Farm Road. So the thing is, it's not perfect. It doesn't comply with the standards. But as Mr. Snyder said, the agency that we look to for the most direction is okay with that. And I think probably members of this committee know anytime you can make 4 out of 5 people not upset. I'm not talking about happy. I'm just saying not upset. That's pretty good result. But that being said, Acorn Road would be 100% compliance with the addressing standards. Little lower satisfaction rate, I think. But
Mr. Goss.
As somebody whose name is grossly misspelled all the time, I hate Champaign and I hate Nuttale. So I'm a guy that grows trees, so I know how to spell both of those, but I hate them both because I've got a 4-letter word or at the end of my name, and it's misspelled every time I call. So if I understand the residents saying, if I got to spell CHINCKAPIN, because nobody knows how to spell Chinkapin, and it'll take them a long time. I think if we've got 4 out of 5 that are satisfied, I think we ought to just move forward and get it done.
Thank you. Further comments before we vote? Okay, all in favor of putting forward to the county board for the Squire Farm for the north-south and Centennial Farm for the east-west, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Nope. Thank you, that passed.
Since we haven't seen the resolution, could it not be on the consent agenda?
That's fine.
Okay, thank you.
That's fine. Okay, that commences that part for the night. We'll move on then to B, the proposed fiscal year 2018 county planning contract. And thank you again, Leanne, for coming, and thank you, Charlos and Barons, for being here. Is there such a motion to approve the proposed county planning contract for 2018? Moved by Ms. Petrie, seconded by Mr. Marsh. Susan, do you want to fill us in on that some, please, first?
This is coming back to you after being held for 60 days, beginning this June. And as you can see, there has been a reallocation of funds from the county to the RPC so that an amount of $12,280 has become available for the fiscal year 18 county planning contract. And therefore, it represents an increase to the amount that we were not aware would have been possible back in June. So that additional reallocated funding has been reflected on the proposal to add 165 staff hours to existing the projects that are proposed to be continued. And the attachment lists the exact changes to the proposed fiscal year 18 contract, namely that 90 hours be added to the MS4 stormwater program mapping project, 30 planner hours be added to develop partnerships and agreements that we expect to need to transition to the program year 2019 with regard to the expected changes to the residential electronics collections. 45 planner hours to be added to begin the comprehensive update to the Champaign County Solid Waste Management Plan, and some additional funds to go toward commodities, which are non-staff expenses, to add a annual subscription to a MiFi to use during field collection of data for the MS4 project, the actual unit itself, and a portion of the ongoing ArcMap GIS subscription. So that's in a nutshell what the reallocated funds would be used for the fiscal year 2018 proposed county planning contract. Other than that, no further changes were identified or additional comments received directly with regard to this proposal.
Thank you, Susan. Comments, questions, discussion on this from the committee? Ms. Petrie.
Yes, this is going to be for the public record. I do appreciate all the work on the contract, and I appreciate the fact over time that there's been more flexibility built into the monies in the contract so it doesn't tie their hands as much as was the case a number of years ago. But being consistent with what I've said every single year, this separation of the work in relationship to planning for the county is just not best practice. And I just can't support continuing this kind of arrangement with the contract. My no vote is not going to stop this from being approved by this committee or by the county board. But as I reflect back on my obligation as an urban planner, each year I have a harder and harder time supporting the contract. There's no reflection on Susan's work. It's no reflection on what Rita does. It's just a reflection on this is just not best practice in urban planning. And one thing that I don't see listed here, and it isn't because I don't understand the onus of the MS4, which is just taking a whole lot of time, much more than maybe John really anticipated how long it was going to take, but it's taking a lot of time and taking away time from being able to really start focusing on a serious look at the LRMP. And I said that last year that we have done so many amendments for the LRMP, it's cherry picking, and good planning practice is you've got to go back and look at the whole document and the gestalt, and I don't see anything here doing that. And again, I'm saying I respect the issues of the pressure of time and being able to do it, but I always want to keep that on the table so as we move forward and we maybe have some opportunities to start working on that, it stays in the tickler file and moves up to the top of the list, because it will take a couple of years to do it. We're into, the 5th or 6th year of it, and by the time it would start rolling around, we're almost to the 9 or 10 year time period, and that's an awfully long time. But again, I want to be very clear. My lack of support for the contract is no reflection on the work done or who's doing the work or anything like that. It's just not best practice in urban planning to have this separation.
Thank you, Patsy. Further comments? Mr. Snyder.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to indicate my support for this planning contract for 2018. I think that we've worked cooperatively with RPC to develop a plan that provides additional resources for Mr. Hall's department, addressing some areas that have been also requested, particularly LRMP. And we will fund the increase in this contract through a negotiated reduction in another area or another initiative with RPC. So the net will be a reduction to the cost to the general fund overall.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Further comments? Mr. Marsh.
A question, Patsy, or how do we move closer to using best practices. If there's a gap here, is there a suggestion or an opportunity?
Well, from best practices, having such a defined separation between special projects and long-term planning and zoning doesn't work as well. It doesn't give the flexibility in a one constructed planning office, which would have subsets of these, but then things can move back and forward, and there are many times, and again, I want to underline what I said, there's much more flexibility in the contract, but there were times when something would come up and it would take 3 months of going through various stages to get money moved around, which made it very difficult for the folks at RPC when those delays would come up, just because those were procedural delays. Now, there's one thing that at the agenda meeting, and Rita attended the agenda meeting, and she pointed out to me, and I haven't had a chance to follow through or follow up on that, and she indicated to me that there are some restrictions or constrictions in relationship to the MPO and CUATS, and my answer to her was I always think of CUATS as a standalone agency, and that's the way it would be in planning agencies, the transportation planning. But she indicated there are some other complexities in aggregation of the office, and I do intend to visit with her and understand that a little bit better. So maybe it's totally a moot situation, so I can't give you an answer, but I do intend to ask some more questions.
Mr. Goss?
Mr. Snyder, did I understand you right? This $12,280 was found some other place, and we're going to save money, or is this $12,280 money we found from something else and we're just adding it in? Because it's hard for me to support a 16% increase unless we're going to save it somewhere else in these times.
Mr. Goss, we're eliminating support of one of the programs that's resulting in about a $22,000 savings, and then so we're taking $12,000 of that and adding it back in. Earlier this year, Rita Blackett approached us regarding increasing the contract. It was a more modest increase that was proposed. So as we talked through this with RPC, together we agreed that this was a priority and that we needed even more resources for this. But since we would eliminate that other program, we would take those as a larger portion of those savings and apply it to this.
Thank you.
Ms. Furtado?
I just want to make sure I totally understand, too, what you're talking about. So what you're saying is that, so say, for example, they decided they needed to do 521 hours in one thing, they couldn't do that, right? That's what this is saying.
When I got on the board, things were very constrained on the contract, and I was sort of moved to kind of a miscellaneous line where that allows movement. It took a couple of years to do that, but that makes it much easier for them than having to come back. And that it took us about 2 to 3 month window of time delay to get that movement done.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That will not be on the consent, which is fine. We go on then to C, the proposed minor amendments to the Champaign County Land Resource Management Plan. Is there such a motion to approve these? Anyone care to make a motion? Moved by Ms. Petrie. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Marsh. Discussion. Although I guess go ahead, Susan, first. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you. These are annual minor amendments to the text of principally volumes 1 and 2 of the Land Resource Management Plan. This year, as before, we would update the land use management area map in volume 2 to be consistent with the GIS data. indicators of municipal boundaries, et cetera, changes to those especially. And Part 1 would be, changes to Volume 1 would including information and an overview of the MS4, the Champaign County MS4 program, stormwater management program, and a map of the Champaign County's MS4 jurisdiction. So it's an update to that volume.
Mike Vernon, come on. Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes unanimously. Move on then to the monthly reports. We have before us the May 2017 and the June 2017 reports. Are there any questions on those? Ms. Petrie.
I have a question, just to prove that I've read them. Page 21. It absolutely intrigues me what this is titled, and that's agricultural courtesy permits. So why do we use the terminology of courtesy permits?
We can, under state law, we cannot charge a fee for agricultural permits.
So it's a legal term.
Well, the point is it's something that we encourage folks to come and get a courtesy permit, but if they wanted to play hardball with us, we can't really make them get a permit because agriculture is exempt. But we want to give courtesy permits because, one, it lets them document that, okay, Champaign County agrees this is an agricultural use.
Okay.
Then neighbors call, we can tell them that's an agricultural use. So everybody is better off if we get those.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions? Mr. King.
It would be about the zoning compliance inspections. I know you listed that the temporary staffing are the ones that manage that. So if we believe that MS4 will continue on for quite a bit, does that just mean that we won't reach that anticipated budget amount ever?
That's exactly right. Now, on the other hand, the MS4, as I explained after our EPA audit, we're taking a big hit 2017 and 2018 to get our storm sewer system map in place. Should have been in place long ago. Well, it's going to be in place at the end of 2018. And then that should reduce the amount of resources we need in the MS4 program. The land disturbance erosion control permits, when the county board adopted the erosion control ordinance, based on the track record, I thought it would be 2 to 3 permits a year. That's what it's turning out to be. So that's not going to be real big, but that will be a permanent increase in the workload, the inspections for those things. But yeah, 2017 and 2018 is when the county's taken a big hit on the storm sewer system map. After that, it will be less so. Next year, we'll probably have a discussion about staffing related to MS4. There was an increase last year, which made a really big difference. I can't say at this point if I can't lose that staffing after 2018. We need a certain amount of it. Maybe we can shift some of that back into doing the compliance inspections. Compliance inspections are extremely important, particularly in Champaign County, because things move so fast that once something gets in place, if it's not documented 5 years down the road, then they've been in business for 5 years, and now you're telling them they never got an approval. So it is really an important thing. I wish we could had time to do all of those, but we just simply don't have the time right now. maybe after 2018 we can get back on track. I don't think it's going to be back on track like it was before 2017, so we'll have that discussion next year.
Any further questions, Ms. Petrie?
Can you remind us how many interns you have in the office now?
Well, we don't really have any interns. We have a graduate student who is working on a temporary basis.
All right.
As it turns out, she's very happy working on that project, and she is a great employee to have. I hope that we can find some way to keep her on it, because now, every day she works on it, she's becoming more and more the expert.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Excellent to hear. And as I do every year as we go into budget time, I acknowledge fact, and John doesn't give me a candy bar for doing this, that his office really is short-staffed. I know we don't have it in the budget, but I think it needs to be acknowledged about that particular department in the county.
Further comments on these? Okay, we'll receive them, place those on file then. Move on to other business. Is there any other business that anyone has that needs to come before this committee at this point in time? Seeing none. Oh, John, do you have something? Sorry.
I found out just yesterday that we now have a solar farm developer looking very interested at a location in Champaign County now. They're trying to sign up landowners, so hopefully over the next month we'll get an idea of how interested Champaign County landowners are. But I think, and I've already given Susan a heads up, I think we're going to be looking in the next few months at needing to do a major amendment to the zoning ordinance for solar farm requirements. That's not going to be near the task that wind farm requirements were, but it is still going to be a big project. And Susan and I will be talking about how we can possibly get that done. But I know that we need, if this project moves ahead, we will need to have that done really as quickly as possible, and certainly by probably March or February. A major amendment like this, there's no way to get it done in anything less than 5 months, period. It just cannot be done. Municipalities have to have a chance to comment. Townships have to have a chance to comment. We have to bring it to you before we could even go to the ZBA. Then it comes back to you where it stays for a month before it goes to the county board. So I think we can do that in 5 months. But we'll probably be bringing that to you next month if we can possibly get it done for your approval to take it to a public hearing. So just wanted to give you a heads up.
Mr. Goss?
Sorry. Yeah, John, is there a reason why we shouldn't proceed regardless of whether this? I'm getting a request. I'm getting 2 to 3 requests a month for not only Champaign County, but Ford, Livingston. I mean, we've already turned down one in Vermilion. So, I mean, I think we might as well get it on the books.
I agree. I would like to have a developer involved in the process so he can tell us when we're off track or, on track. And this developer is willing to do that. And again, it's not that we just do whatever they want, but we need that kind of informed review. And so I plan to talk to him more in the coming month to see what fits into his time frame. And, I would welcome comments from any solar developer that wanted to provide those comments. But this developer just contacted us in the past 2 weeks, and that's the first actual inquiry we've had from a developer. So it is something that we've seemingly needed to do, but yet no one had actually contacted us. So I think time is ripe.
Ms. Petrie.
2 questions. Are there any models out there in any other counties that we can sort of use as the building block to start the work on any zoning amendment? And then part 2 is I'm not up on what kind or if any kind of income is generated for a county from a solar farm? I mean, I understand the wind farms, but I just haven't studied solar farms. So can you answer both of those?
Regarding are there good models? Yes, I think there are. I think we have them. We're always looking for more, but right now I think Kankakee County has an excellent ordinance. It's much better than any other ordinance I've seen. Regarding income, they're already talking to Paula Bates about taxes. And frankly, it's not clear how these things should be handled in Illinois. So I would refer you to Paula on that, and that's really all I can say about taxes. But they're already working on that.
All right.
Mr. King.
And Mr. Hall, is there, and maybe this comes later, a minimum amount of space that's required to entertain?
This developer is looking for 800 to 1,000 acres. Wow. The wind farm that we did totaled out at about 30 acres. It is. It's scattered.
Mr. Goss.
Robert, we have a dozen people asking us to put solar panels on our roof of our store, so it's only 45,000 square feet.
Yeah, and I would tell you, I think that's part of the holdup for landowners signing on. I mean, it is for me. I'm gonna obligate 3 to 4 generations of people to this, and the question they ask me is, so when they leave in 50 years, what's left underneath there? I can't answer that. I don't think anybody can answer that because nobody really knows. We know the ground's relatively undisturbed, but it's had no vegetative growth for years and years and years, and nobody really knows. I do know LaSalle. I don't know if you saw LaSalle County's ordinance either. I know they have one. I went up and looked at it, but I don't know what their ordinance is.
Yeah, I recently found out about that, and I went to their website. It wasn't on the website yet, so I will try to get a copy of that. But
Further comments on this? Seeing none, thank you, John, for that. Chair's report. I maybe should have done this earlier in the meeting, but just welcome Ms. Furtado to the ELEC committee, her first one after being appointed to the full county board. Move on then to designation of items to be placed on consent agenda. I have 10C as the only item. And with that, I would take a motion to adjourn. Moved by Mr. Patterson, seconded by Mr. King. We're adjourned. Thank you.